Hey, everybody. This is the Behind the Gate podcast with your host, a washed up has-been and an absolute nobody. Thanks for joining us. This is this is
Thought you were
a little bit.
introducing me.
Oh, yeah, no, I wasn't both of those people. You're the washed up has-been and I'm the nobody, right? Yeah.
That makes sense.
No, welcome, everybody. AJ and Bryce here. This episode is a little bit delayed. We had some technical difficulties with our podcast server. They had to do a bunch of technical stuff behind the scenes. We recorded this a week ago, and we're just finally getting it out to you. So this is going to basically be a recap of the two races ago. By the time it gets released, which was Indianapolis, and right?
I have no idea. I was gonna ask you. I really don't know.
Shit, I'll edit that because I don't know either. What the hell was?
No, don't edit that.
I'm editing
This is all gonna go in there.
No, it's not. No, it's right. I promise you, it isn't.
Man,
why do we suck so bad?
Indy
results.
Seattle. No. Yeah, Seattle.
This is going to be a recap of Seattle. And we had Jason from SGB Racing, the suspension expert who supports AJ and his bike throughout the season. We had him as a guest, and we actually had a pretty cool conversation with him about suspension, about the nuances and intricacies of suspension and getting that dialed and the art and science that it is to get the bike set up for Supercross. So that was a cool part of the conversation. We encourage you to listen to that, and then we get into our recap of the race. We kind of mixed it all together, and it was a fun episode. Before we get into it, I want to encourage everybody to go check out our Patreon page. It's something we just launched a couple weeks ago, and we're picking up some momentum with it. You can see it at patreon.com/behindthegatepodcast. We have several different support options from $1 a month all the way up to $100 a month for a premiere, basically an ad placement. So go check it out. All of the money that we raise for the first month of the program, half of that is going to be going to Road to Recovery. So it's a great way to get some behind the scenes stuff from us, be involved in the creative process, get some social media exposure because we're doing some shout outs and stuff like that through AJ's page for some of the levels of support. Get entered to win some swag from AJ's Academy, apparel, all the way up to a Max's tire giveaway and everything in between. So there's a bunch of different stuff you can get involved with. We encourage you to go check that out. We really appreciate it. And we definitely want to make a sizable donation to Road to Recovery at the end of the month. So all of your support will help us do that. We could all feel good about that because Road to Recovery is such an amazing organization that really helps out a lot of guys and gals in the sport when they need it the most. And we want to be as involved with them as we possibly can and support them at every opportunity. So go check out patreon.com/behindthegatepodcast. We already have one supporter who's on our, what we're going to call, I guess, for the sake of this shout out, our shout out tier. AJ, you want to give a nice little shout out?
Yeah. Shout out to Pete Shepard. Pete was actually I was going to say he was my intern, but Pete actually did won the Maxis fan giveaway. And at the race, I didn't have a mechanic, and Pete stepped up and actually acted as my mechanic for the day, which was pretty awesome. So big shout out, Pete Shepard. First supporter.
Yeah, Pete.
Dang.
First supporter and at our middle of the level tier. So we really appreciate the support, Pete. Encourage everybody else to go check it out. Join Pete, get some social media exposure. We're going to post about it. We're going to help you guys as you help us. And there's some other stuff that it's a little secret to our supporters, so we won't get into that. But thank you, Pete, and for everybody else who's supported at whatever level they possibly can. So go check it out, patreon.com/behindthegatepodcast. Before we get into the episode, we'd also like to thank FXR Gear. And for everybody who listens to this podcast who likes AJ's kits and all of the FXR riders' kits, we are offering a 30% off coupon code for everybody who listens to this podcast and supports AJ's Racing and likes FXR Gear. It's time of the year to get some new gear, my friends. 30% off is no joke. So go check out FXR. They have some rad kits. We all love them. They look great. They feel great. AJ has mentioned several times there's some of the best gear out there, and 30% off is an amazing deal. So here's the coupon code, folks. ACFXR MX80. Again, ACFXR MX80 gets you 30% off at FXR. And thank you, FXR, for all your support. Now, without any further ado, a week and a half late at this point, welcome to Jason, SGB Racing. Enjoy this suspension breakdown and race recap, folks. Thank you very much. You don't want to say anything, mister?
Nah. Nope.
Okay. Have fun. Hey, Jason, thanks for coming.
Oh, nice.
No. Hey, what's up, Jason? How you doing, man?
How's it going, guys?
Not
You
too
know what?
shabby.
We're
Not
doing
too
pretty good.
shabby.
Doing pretty good. You know, being that it's Tuesday, we're getting this episode done with, and I don't have to wait for AJ. I know it's funny. We were just talking about how difficult he is to get a hold of, and it really makes me sick sometimes, especially when we're trying to get something done, and it'll go days without hearing from him.
I was actually going to add him to my phone plan just so I can make sure that he actually has a phone, because it seems like sometimes he doesn't.
No,
I know.
you know the rule. You just have to call or text 3 times.
Three
and then I
times,
answer.
just like this.
Or just say, I'm telling you, preface every message with Allie's going to kill you, and then what you really want to say, and so he sees that right away, and he'll get on it. Or
you need something to spark my interest.
Bear's in trouble. Bear's in trouble. And then, yeah, hey, so AJ, what picture should I use for Instagram post?
Cold, silent.
Well, thanks
Sorry.
for coming on, man, especially on such short notice. We'll just give you a little intro. Obviously, you've been instrumental in AJ's program this year, providing the suspension support, and last year, actually. So you want to just kind of give everybody an idea of how you got involved with AJ and the scope of which you help him out?
This is a good story, actually.
So, started off with me contacting AJ. I enjoy the motocross school side of testing and just working with the up and coming and people who want to learn. And on a business side, it's these riders are going to AJ to use him for experience and stuff like that. So anything he says is going to be very influential to them because they're looking up to him, and that's why they're paying money to hear his voice. So if he is believing in a company such as myself at SGB Racing, he would be more likely to send me more customers on a business side. But on a personal side, I just enjoy working with the schools. So I messaged him for a while, and he ignored me, and which I actually I took personal for a while, but now I realize that's just how he is. And I had to send him 3 messages, and he finally responded, and we decided to set up a day of working. I think there was some suspension struggles before, so I think he was ready for a change, and I just happened to be there. So I went down there and to Tom Hawk, and we tested on a Supercross track. It was a kind of a blind test where he gave me a set of suspension, and no one kind of knew about it. I got there, and I had all my settings set, and I was like, I felt good, confident, but I knew that I had to be at a certain level compared to what he's been riding, or else it was automatic, door shut, this is not going to work.
And what did I do to you that morning? What did I send you?
So he shows me a setting sheet from another company, and my settings are on a whole different page. Like, not even close. Like air pressure settings, because we were running the show attack fork. It's not even close. And my wife was with me. And I remember looking at her, and I'm like, I'm not even on the same page as this. Like, we are way stiffer. And I remember she said to me that, well, if he was happy, you wouldn't be here. So I just stuck to what we went with and tried to remind him that it was going to be stiff compared to what he was used to. Then he went out there and he was like rolling everything, which is what is typical for when you're trying out a new set. And then he started doing some doubles, and I was like, that's no big deal. And then he hit like a triple in there, and I was like, and then he skimmed the whoops, and I was like, all right, well, we have a little bit of trust. And I remember him riding and coming back in, and he absolutely enjoyed it. And even the thing that he said to me that time that has always stuck with me was like, I need to learn how to trust my suspension again because it does everything I wanted it to do. And then
the biggest thing for me,
then.
the biggest thing for me going in, so, and you always tell me this story and it makes me laugh, and it is true. Like, there was you had kind of a high bar set coming in because I didn't know you from a hole in the wall. And if that suspension right away, with no idea of really what I want or need, wasn't better than what I had and what I had spent 2 years on, I would have probably just wrote you off. As bad as that sounds, that's honestly what probably would have happened.
And that's what I expected.
Yeah, thank God it went the way it did, because you've done so much for me, and my bike now is the best bike I've ever had. But what the biggest thing I've always struggled with, and I'm sure a lot of Supercross guys can attest to it, especially the way they build the tracks now where there's no transitions, is I felt like I couldn't trust the bike in those harsh little pockets, and it would, I don't know if when it blows through the stroke, it ends up shooting you kind of off kilter and sideways a little bit. And this was something that was happening all the time, and it was just driving me nuts. And now it's an issue that really we don't have anymore, thank God. So it's boiled down to me just learning to trust the suspension, especially in the whoops, like just trying to get my confidence back. But it's a good feeling knowing that it's me. And I was talking to somebody about this. I was on the phone with Vortex. We had a conference call with the Vortex guys last night, and they were just asking updates on the season, how I felt. And they're asking, like, if I could do anything to my bike to make it better, what would I do? And my first answer, I said nothing. Even though my bike's pretty stock, everything right now, it's on me. This is the best bike I've ever had. The suspension, especially with that spring fork, is the best I've ever had. It's just trying to build my own confidence up in myself and get comfortable. But thank God I went your route, because just to think of all the doors it's opened for me, like that day could have so easily gone the other direction, I feel like, especially when I sent you those settings that were just so far off. Like, I feel bad. Like, you must have looked at that and been like, oh no, what the what the heck?
Well, I want to pick your brain a little bit about that, Jason, because suspension is one of those things. It's an art and a science, and so few people really master it. And that leaves the majority of people riding dirt bikes, they need a service like yours. And, whether they're using a competitor, which we hope to steer some people your way with this episode, or yourself, I mean, it's something that people really do put a lot of trust into. And I think especially for Supercross, nobody out there, unless you're familiar with the bikes and have ridden Supercross track, can appreciate how stiff and how that suspension is set up. I mean, it is unbelievable. So can you speak to like your experience and how you've been able to really get the science and art of the suspension down?
The Supercross suspension is extremely stiff. It is almost like a 2x4 on the initial portion of the stroke, just to stay high and where it needs to be. I will say that the day one with AJ definitely tested my mental strength. It was a pure confidence thing. Any type of business or any type of sport or anything that like that is something that you need confidence for. If you lack that confidence, one, the rider sees that, and then he second guesses everything you're saying, no matter if it's correct or not. So you can definitely have them feed off that. And then you have the other spectrum where the rider always wants to please you. He always wants to seem like he knows what he's talking about. Doesn't want to come off as unintelligent when it comes to suspension. Whereas most people lack the intelligence there. And myself was one of them. That's the reason why I got into the suspension business, was I felt like I knew everything else about a dirt bike, whether it was tearing down motors or just rebuilding a bike. I just seemed to not understand the suspension side of it. So I did a lot of research, and I was lucky enough to work with the guys at Race Tech, and they took me under their wing for a long time and allowed me to work with them and test with them, and it brought my knowledge to a different level, especially in the Northeast area. It's not a big Supercross area. Obviously, out in California is, so I was able to go out to California for long periods of time and do one-on-one testing with professional riders and actually learn how to dial in a bike more so than just, stacking shims and putting them where it is to make it handle where it does, but to actually test and learn that science of it as well, such as what a rider is feeling, what he really isn't feeling. A lot of times when they're frustrated or things aren't going their way, the first thing to be the complaint is suspension. And I think AJ will tell you that we have some tricks that I always do to him to see if we're actually feeling something or if it's a mental side of it. So.
Gotcha. Now,
you don't make a, what do you do again? You say you make a change, but you really don't, or vice versa?
So when I test with AJ, we normally have a start setting, and then anytime he comes in with feedback, I make changes to the suspension, and then I document it all. And I would say about 90% of the time we end up back within a click or two from the start, which is good, which is good in a sense, because in order to find that optimal performance, you have to go past it and go to crappy again. So you're going to get better, but you'll never know where the best is until you fall back off of that face. So we do, and then I always do like one click left, one click right, which puts us right back to where we were. And I'm like, yeah, go try that, and he'll come in and be like, that's perfect. I'm like, I knew it.
I love that. That's funny, but it's funny because a lot of it is so mental, and if you think that you're getting the help that you think you need, then that's really all you need.
Right.
Sometimes, yeah, it's weird.
Absolutely. Yeah, and again, there is a lot of fine tuning to it. So you have riders that are very in tune with the bike, and can give you good feedback. And then the other thing is understanding what they're talking about, because the dialogue can be totally different across the board. Somebody says it's packing or it's swapping or it's kicking. It can honestly mean something totally different coming from somebody else. His perception of packing might be totally different than the next person's perception, or it may not be packing and it may be doing another characteristic, and they're misdiagnosing it. So when we do testing, I always try to keep it neutral. I never have any tools in my hands. That way he doesn't think when he comes in to talk to me that, okay, he sees something. I need to say something so that way he knows that I know. So I keep it, very straight face, very like poker face in a sense, and no tools in my hand. And I just say, how was it? And I don't ever say things like, how did this part of the bike feel, or how did that feel? I let him tell me all of his feedback. So that way I can dissect it easier without it being, misconstrued or anything like that.
Yeah, man, suspension is so tough. I mean, and you see guys like this year, Cooper Webb, a couple times in podium interviews, you've heard him talk about how he felt uncomfortable, he chased the setting, and then he ended up reverting back to where he started, and then he was fine. So really all that tells you is that he was not riding to his full potential, so maybe the bike wasn't working right, but probably mostly in his head, and he's not riding to his ability, so he goes changing the bike up, and then by the end of the night, he's right back where he started with the setting. So there's a fine line between chasing that right setting, but then also chasing after, bike changes when it's really technique or flowing with the track, or a change that needs to be made from a rider standpoint. Sometimes it's tough to figure out which one that is.
It can be very tough. Man. It can be very tough my end as well, trying to dissect it. And let's just say when you're confident on the track and you're attacking the track faster because you have that confidence, the settings are normally stiffer with you, AJ. So when you're hesitant and you're not feeling that flow, it feels harsh to you because we're running a stiffer setting because of the confidence level. And then when you lose that confidence in some sections, then it feels uneasy for you. So then we chase that game, and then somehow, some way we get your confidence back up and we end up right back where we were.
Yep. So one thing I've told myself now is just when I get out on the track, no matter how uncomfortable I feel, just keep riding. That's what I have to remind myself. Just keep riding. Just keep riding. Just do not pull off. Because in the past, I would have done a lap or two, came in and been like, this sucks. And I wouldn't have been able to even like tell you why it sucked. I would have just been pissed off and just said it sucked. So I just keep riding. Right. And then if you need to fine tune it from there as you get faster and faster. Yeah. But
well, so let me ask you this, Jason. How much of it is predicting the future? You know, and what I mean by that is a lot of guys, they're anticipating when they're out in practice and even in the heat races, they're making the considerations of how the track is going to break down over the night. They're looking forward to the main, how the bike is going to handle lap 1 versus lap 19. How much does that come into play when you're trying to dial in for a night show or a Saturday for Supercross? Because, you know, when he's going out in Group B qualifying 1 or free practice even, it's going to be a lot different than if he's in a heat race or LCQ or then main event. So how much do you try to look forward to how the track is breaking down?
With that on the professional side, when we're doing practice, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for how the later races, like the LCQ, the main event, how I predict the track to be, set it up for that. So that way we're kind of a step ahead of the game, and that way it can progress with that. So when we get there, we're not behind and trying to catch up, because obviously once those races start, there's no adjustments. You know, we can do some. I don't like making drastic adjustments, you know, during obviously the night show. So during the practices is when we're trying to dial in the track. And when he's trying to dial in the track, it's tough for him to give me feedback on suspension because he's focusing on
getting up to speed.
Correct. He's focusing on rhythm sections. He's focusing on, you know, which way he's going to do this, and all of that stuff. So during that is when I'm paying attention the most to the bike. And it's tough for me being, like, for the first 3 rounds before he fired me, it was tough being the suspension guy and the mechanic, because I got to help him on the riding stuff, letting him know his times, and I got to write on the pit board and get all that stuff done. But mentally, you know, my knowledge and my expertise is suspension, so I'm watching the bike the entire time, and then I'm like, shit, he's coming around the corner, I got to write something stupid on this pit board real quick that he's not even going to look at, and try to get it out there. So, like, it was tough to juggle for that, but I think we shoot for what we predict the track to be in the night show. Like I said, especially the later races, and we try to go from there.
And the good thing is, for people listening that may not know, watching live, race day live and the broadcast at night, the track that we're riding in free practice and time qualifying is pretty much the most rough you'll see the track throughout the whole day. So free practice, it's usually pretty gnarly and beat up. Time qualifier number 1 is usually the worst the track will be all day, because they'll groom it a little bit before the second time qualifier. But even then, the track's usually pretty gnarly. The best you'll ever see the track is in the heat race. And sometimes the LCQ, it's really good too. But then by the time you have the main event roll around, the track's a complete disaster again. So if you have the bike close for that first time qualifier and that second time qualifier, you should be right on track. Because if the whoops have begun to break down to where you're jumping or to where you're doing something else, it's usually a good sign of what's going to happen. Not necessarily in that heat race, but come main event time. But shoot, I just had a question, but I forgot. Oh, and I don't want people to think I don't want people to think I actually fired you. So you wrenched at what, the first 3 rounds? Right.
We wrenched at the first 3 rounds, and that's basically just because of my scheduling and the business itself, and I do have a full-time job as well. So I was able to come out. I wanted to be there for the first 3 rounds, just so that way, if we needed to make bike changes, it's kind of more crucial in the first 3, just because all of the rigorous off-season testing we did, we don't know how close we are when we actually come to a race day scenario. So I wanted to make sure that I was there for my AJ buddy, and if we needed
Did we
anything,
make
I
any
could be there.
changes? I don't remember making any changes.
I made some small quick adjustments throughout the night, just a change for the track and the feedback and what you say. Because for me as a suspension guy, the best feedback I get from you most of the time is within 3 minutes of you coming off the track. So the time that you don't want to talk to anybody, I'm normally the one bothering you, saying, "Hey, this is what we need to do." And truthfully, you just have to suck it up and deal with it, because you want a good bike that you got to talk to me every once in a while. So that is, and then later in the day when your heart rate comes back down, you kind of distort your memory of the fine details. So then the only thing that sticks out there is the big things, like if it was doing something. But since we had the 2019 KX 450F, we did a 1 valve stack setting for Supercross, and we've been running that exact same valve stack since day one on the bike. So the only thing we've done is external click adjustments, nothing internally as far as shims go.
Yeah, and it's been awesome.
That was going to be one of my questions is what differs on AJ's bike versus the stock suspension setup?
So for AJ's bike, we are running a stage 3 anodized coated uppers, and we are running Race Tech gold valve internals front and rear. On the rear, we're running a rebound separator valve, which allows us to make adjustments to the rebound portion without compromising the compression side of the stroke on the shock. On a normal shock, if you actually speed the rebound up, the compression will get a little bit softer. So with a rebound separator valve, it cuts down on the change. So on a harder packed track, we can keep the compression where we need it and kind of speed up the rebound to get more traction.
Gotcha.
Didn't know that.
The rider doesn't even know. That's such a typical AJ thing. Oh yeah, whatever.
Learn something new every day.
You tell me it works. You tell me it works, I'll ride it. So that's actually brings up another question I have for you. I'm going to put you on the spot. How intuitive is AJ with his digestion and regurgitation of suspension information? If he's on the bike, he comes off the track. Is he one of the guys that could tell you exactly what's wrong or what he's feeling? Or does he dance around it and you got to try to get a Rosetta Stone and figure it all out?
He's actually very good at feedback. It's getting better now because this is our second year working together. And honestly, our first year together was we had a couple test days, and then he went out to Supercross, and I, stayed back in Maryland at my shop, and he did his thing, and we had phone call conversations. So in all reality, last year, we didn't have a lot of time working together in person. So obviously the relationship has become stronger, which makes it easier. I can decipher what he's saying more, and I can see his body language and his feedback. I know when he says a word, what it means as far as in relation to what the bike is doing. But he is very in tune. The only time I think we get kind of away from it being reality is just if he has one of those days where he's just really frustrated on the track. But that's with anyone. When they're frustrated on the track, when they come off, everything is horrible, no matter what it is. So that's the only time you're kind of like, okay, I'm going to give it 5 minutes and then I'll come back.
Yeah, and or at least I like to think I'm this way. I won't, once I calm down, I realize that the blame shouldn't be put on the bike, and sometimes I might even be that way to a fault, where in the past I've just ridden whatever I had, and if there was an issue on the track, I automatically would assume it was me no matter what. Which, most of the time it probably is the rider. But I know for a fact that looking back, before I was working with you and earlier on in my career, there was times when things probably should have been changed with that bike, and I just kept trying to make adjustments myself to make it work. But like I say, there's a fine line between that, because then you get people listening to this podcast and amateurs and C riders, even local slower A riders. I mean, it's a lot of it, just like when people ask me about arm pump, I say there's not one solution to it, but it's technique, and it's probably you. So if at that level, I'm sure there's a lot that can be adjusted technique wise, and there's probably something that you're doing wrong before you go chasing a crazy suspension setting that shouldn't be chased. What are your thoughts on that? And that brings up a question. Do you have clients that it's just super frustrating and they're trying to chase a setting and it's probably not a setting they should be chasing, or how does that play out?
Absolutely. There's definitely times where people touch the clickers and they shouldn't. And I tell people all the time, they're there to be adjusted, but that doesn't mean you have to adjust them. And I think a lot of it is the fact that all the professional riders, the only thing you ever hear on podium or interviews is suspension. You never hear anything about, my motor just wasn't handling, with the most power. It just didn't feel where it wanted to be. It's always, we made suspension adjustments. We made suspension changes. I didn't feel good on the bike, so we adjusted the suspension in this way or that way. So as amateur riders or your weekend warriors, they watch these professionals speak about suspension all the time. So they, in their head, feel like, okay, that means I have to adjust it, because that's got to be the reasons why everything is going the way it's going. I have to adjust my suspension more. And what normally happens is, if you don't understand how to adjust suspension, you probably will put your bike more out of whack, so your front forks are not working with your rear shock and they're fighting each other.
That's, I think, one of the most common things that I used to see is people would mess with everything on their forks and never touch the shock. And I was like, yeah, you gotta keep the bike in balance. Like, everything you do up front, you need to at least match in the back. Would you agree?
Yes and no. I think you got to keep the bike balanced, but just because you make a change up front doesn't mean you need to make a change in the back per se. It all depends. And the biggest thing about why no one adjusts the rear shock, for the most part, they don't. What we see a lot on the amateur side is, if they're going to adjust the rear shock, they're going to slow their rebound down, and that's the only thing they do. They believe that the rebound adjustment is a one-way screw, and you can only slow it down and you can't speed it up. And the reason behind that, 90% of the time, is they feel like they have a kicking issue. And most of the time, they're creating a worse kicking issue. So as a rider, you have more control and feel in the front forks. The front end is going to be a more sensitive and red feeling from the feedback, because your hands are connected to it. Your upper body is right above it, whereas you have a pair of heavy boots on that is connected to your, foot pegs, and then that's traveling through and then inside the frame area is your actual rear shock. So what happens is, the riders are going in and they'll come into like a corner from braking bumps, and they feel like the bike is sending them over the bars. So they're like, whoa, my rebound is way too fast. So they slow it down. But in all reality, what they're actually feeling majority of the time is they feel their wheel compressing, coming into the fender and staying there. It's not rebounding quick enough. So they feel the fact that the wheel is not on the ground, which is giving them an uneasy feeling. So what they do is, they're like, oh, I'm going over the bars. That means my rebound's kicking me. So they screw their rebound in, they slow it down, and what happens is it stays up even longer. So then...
And I struggle with that too, as far as compression goes. I struggle to be able to tell the difference between what's too soft and what's too stiff, because sometimes those feelings are pretty similar as well.
They can be. Because you can feel a harshness from it not compressing, or you can feel harshness from it bottoming. And like, with that being said, if the rider were to speed up the rebound in that situation and get that wheel back on the ground, the kicking would actually no longer exist. Because again, the wheel would be on the ground. They'd have that planted feeling, no longer that uneasy feeling, and it would be a smoother ride. So I get it all the time where I get suspension in for a revalve, and the rebound adjuster on the shock is all the way in. And I call them, and I'm like,
Yikes.
did you have a kicking problem? And they're like, yeah, it was bad. And I explained to them why, and they're like, that makes absolutely perfect sense.
Yep.
So what? Sorry, just while we're on this subject of the amateurs, and even just the laymen who are buying dirt bikes, what do you think about owner's manual suspension guides?
I think the owner manual suspension guides, I haven't looked at them for years to even tell you what the settings are on them, but it gives you a good base. And it kind of breaks down a little bit to you so you can understand in a layman's terms. I will say that the other thing that we see all the time is people will buy a bike, they will watch a video, which is, in many ways very educational, but they'll also tell you how to set the bike up, and they will tell you what clicks to run on the forks and what clicks to run on the shock. And I think that's a very tough thing because people get set into that, and that is rider specific. That's talking about whatever rider that may be, whether it's a pro rider to an amateur at a track, wherever that may be in those conditions. So people get locked into that. They're like, okay, someone that they've looked up to says this, and a lot of times those things can be very informative about certain tips and techniques to do that will help everyone. But when it comes to a suspension setting, it's very rider specific. I've got guys that I would recommend running, stiffer, but they really, really like it soft. And then I have the opposite. I have guys that, if you were to go through I would recommend this setting, they would probably need a stiffer setting. So it's very rider specific. And I think a lot of people get brainwashed into these things. And the same thing with the air forks. I think a lot of people immediately shut down the air forks, and a lot of other companies shut down the air forks. And it put a really, really bad image on it for probably not that good of a reason.
Right. When in all reality, the biggest reason why I say, thank God I don't have the air fork anymore, is because when it came down to making an adjustment, that's when things got confusing. So that was my one big thing with the air fork. It's not like, oh, I think the spring works better and it has a better feel than the air. No. And in fact, if a C rider is coming to you and saying that, they're full of crap, because they're not going to be able to know the difference between the two. It's what the C rider and the B rider are saying that for is because they've heard somebody like myself or top pros say how they don't like the air fork, but we don't like it for adjustability purposes. At least I didn't, because when I'd be at the track without you, Jason, and I would explain what the bike's doing, you could have given me 15 different things to do to that fork. Okay, take a little bit out of the inner chamber, do this to the outer, and do this to the balance. Or you could do this to the balance, do this to the inner. And it's just like, holy cow, where with the spring fork, you have that compression adjustment with the screw, and you're either going in or out with it. So it's pretty basic. And that's something that even I could figure out. My advice to any rider, unless you're riding at an extremely high level, would be send your suspension into Jason, have him do it. When you get it, set the darn sag, and just ride the thing the way it is, because getting it set to your weight and having the sag set in at least a realistic range, not having it set at 80 or 125, get the sag set right and just ride the thing, because anything outside of that, if you're complaining, I would say chances are it's probably on you.
I'm glad you mentioned the sag, because so many people, especially the guys that are picking up bikes secondhand, or just generally don't have a lot of experience on them, but they're all out there. They never touch the sag. They don't even know what it is. And granted, it's a relatively annoying adjustment to have to make. And a lot of people don't have the right tools. Whether it's a spanner wrench to get in there, or whatever. It is something that can be a little cumbersome for the average person, but damn it could make the world a difference on a ride and on your bike. And I'm glad you pointed out the sag thing, because if anybody takes away anything, I'd like to see everybody make sure they set their sag.
Absolutely. And I think with going off the sag thing, a millimeter of adjustment will actually make a huge noticeable difference in what the rider feels. And also, off of that, when you make any type of chassis change, it's going to change your sag. So, for example, if your chain is getting looser, the sag is going to be more. And then the opposite, if your chain gets tighter or you would tighten your chain up, there's less, there's more friction now because the chain is tighter. So it will sag less. And it may be very minor amounts, but sometimes it could be a good amount where it's making a difference. And then the other thing is with the chain adjustment, not only is it the chain, but you're also wheel placement. When your wheel is back a bit further, it's going to change the leverage curve of the bike, which is going to change the sag side of it. So,
yep. And if you guys are changing sprockets, stuff like that too, right?
Yeah. Any type, like I said, any type of change like that, it's going to change the actual feel of the bike. You're probably going to have some type of minor sag adjustment, and there's easy ways to do it. It can be tough. People are like, well, I don't have people here. There's companies out there like Motul with the digital sag scale, which is what we use constantly, but they actually have a bar pad mount that will read you your sag, so you can hook it up to the rear of your bike, and it's got a cable that will run to a digital display on your bar pad, so you can stand on your bike by yourself, and it'll say your sag number, and you can adjust it accordingly. Obviously it's going to take a couple more minutes because you got to get off the bike and put it on the stand, and you have to adjust it yourself, but it can be done. And if that's the feel you want, then that's what is needed.
People skip over that for some reason, the whole sag thing. And it drives me
nuts. I think a lot of people
don't
understand what it is too. And Jason, I think maybe this is a good opportunity for you, the suspension expert, to explain what exactly sag is. Because, AJ and I know about it, obviously. And a lot of the guys do, but for those people who are still scratching their heads on, well, what's sag, and they picked up their phone and they're Googling it, why don't you give them a little breakdown?
So sag is a relation of how much the rear of the bike, or the front, if we're talking about front, is going to squat under the weight of the bike or the weight of the bike and the rider. So it's based off of the preload on the spring. So depending on how much preload we have on the spring, and when I say preload on the spring, I mean how the collars that compress the spring on the shock itself when the shock shaft is fully extended. So when you tighten that up and you put more preload on the spring, it's going to cause less sag. Less preload on the spring is going to cause more sag if the rider and the bike are the exact same. So if the only change is the spring preload, then that's the result you will have. So the sag is measured from the bike on the stand and the rear wheel off the ground, which is your full maximum amount of travel, and then how much it compresses on its own natural rate will give you what many people call a free sag, and then the race sag is when the rider is actually on the bike itself, and then that optimum number that you have is where you need to have the bike set up and to get it to perform the way it should.
Is there a specific number that the bike should be at for free sag? Because I've seen some people cause a stink over the number that it's set at for that, or is that irrelevant?
It does make a difference to a certain degree. As far as the way it's going to handle for you, for the most part, the rider's not going to feel that. It just kind of will tell you more so along the lines of whether we're in the range of the actual spring rates and stuff like that. What is optimal spring rate? So there is a set that you would want to bike the free sag at, but they do kind of go hand in hand as well. So you can't really change your free sag's not going to be way off, and then your race sag going to be dead on. So you're going to see the same variances of it on each. But you can you can tell with like linkage things are getting worn, like your linkage bearings are getting worn. You'll see that your free sag isn't as much as it should be. And I think, going to kind of jumping topic a little bit, this is why I enjoy working so much with the AJ Motocross Academy stuff, because when I do go and assist him at the track, we do sag settings for everyone there. We kind of do the 411 of suspension and go over all the things that I see that are commonly misunderstood or done incorrectly. So it's good to go over that, and then these riders get a free sag setting, and then they kind of understand it and how important it is, which is then makes less headaches for me down the road as a suspension guy, because when they do get their suspension done or all of that stuff, they understand it. So when they get it back, they're less likely to screw it up, in a sense, when they try to adjust it themselves and things like that.
Yep. And another note I'd like to point out, just for, people with kids who are on bikes, or people who lose 20 pounds during the off season or gain 20 pounds during the off season, make sure you're adjusting that sag appropriately with your weight increase or decrease. If you have a little guy who's growing like a weed and is 20 pounds heavier the next season, got to redo the sag. So make sure you're up on that.
Yes, sir. Well, Bryce, would you want to start talking about good old Seattle or what?
Yeah, I think everybody's been waiting for that. And what a race to talk about. Obviously, this season's just been a clusterfuck, for no other better way to say it. I mean, I don't know where we want to start. I think everybody's really scratching their heads at the Muskin penalty, which I don't actually understand. I mean, the rule is pretty clear, so I don't know why there's a lot of ambiguity there. I don't know if you want to speak to that right now, AJ, but from where I'm sitting, I mean, there's the rule. Right. We've seen it happen how many times now? It's pretty cut and dry, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I guess my confusion is where yours is. I don't know why so many people are mad about it if it's a rule. So that people are arguing what the punishment should have been. And
did you mean me specifically, or just you as the general audience? I'm not confused at all. No. I'm confused. Like, I see posts online, and I'm like, do you think the penalty was fair, or do you think that the factory riders are being treated differently? And they compare it to Bowers, who Bowers was on our show, so we know that scenario played out. But this is different. This is black and white, right? In my opinion.
No. I was saying I'm with you as far as being confused on why there is confusion. Because it is the whole docking a guy for being aggressive. That's a gray area, and it can go either way. This is a black and white rule. He jumped on a red cross flag. You go into the rule book. There's rule 245.B, jump on red cross, and it states exactly what the penalty is. So there's no questioning that he did it, and the penalty is what it is. On the other hand, if we're just going to continue to jump ahead here, what happened in the 250 LCQ, where that call was made, that in my mind is slightly more of a gray area, because you heard Carmichael saying his opinion, I have my opinion. John Gallagher, the AMA ref, obviously had his opinion.
Yep, you're referring to what's his face getting pushed off the track. Nothing he could do about getting pushed off his track. Sorry, I can't recall his name off the top of my head.
Howell.
Howell.
Howell hit the Jorgensen guy, the German guy.
Right, Jorgensen. Yeah. Yep. So he gets pushed off the track, and it wasn't even, there was no saving it. Like, he was going off the track, and without gaining a position, basically staying in the position he was in, got on the track the next opportunity, and they docked him for that. They took away, he was the fourth place LCQ finisher, which got him into the LCQ, or into the main, and they took it from him. So that one, I was on the couch watching that, and I'm like, I don't know, man. It didn't look like he sped up off the track, but he certainly had an easier time by avoiding the obstacles than Howell did. And I don't know that I don't know where I sit on that one, to be honest.
So, Jason, where would you sit on that? What call would you have made?
I think they made the right call. And I think I'm gonna cause a little controversy with that, but I think they made the right call, and the reason why I say that is I think the pass was made prior to the triple. He came in; it was a clean block pass, especially for an LCQ. I thought it was a great pass. He made the pass.
Yeah, it wasn't an aggressive pass.
He made the pass coming onto the triple. He was in the 4th place position coming to the triple. The person, I don't know his name, who got bumped off the track,
Jorgensen,
was behind him. When the guy's in the air of the triple, he accelerates down the stretch that is not on the triple, and he gets back in front of him in the corner. I think he made the pass off the track, getting back in. But to go off almost the same exact thing, I also think the Cooper Webb incident from last weekend should have been penalized.
Oh, you do?
When he jumped the tough block and cut the track?
Yeah, when Webb made the pass on Tomac. Now Webb was behind Tomac the entire time when he exited the track. But what I think is the difference in this situation is when Webb cut the track, it gave him an advantage to be on the inside of Tomac. He wouldn't have been able to cut that corner that tight on Tomac if it wasn't for him going off the track, whether intentional or not intentional.
I agree. I think AJ agrees. We talked about that during our recap last week. I know people probably don't like that, and obviously Webb didn't do it on purpose. But if you're looking at it black and white, did he cut the track? Yes. Did he gain an advantage from being in a position where he cut the track? Yes.
I think so. I think that pass only happened because he cut the track. Now, I do not think that he did it intentional in any way, shape, or form. And how he managed to get on the brakes and not clean out Eli's clock is beyond impressive.
I know.
Beyond impressive.
Yep.
Because me personally, I would have been...
How he stayed up.
Yeah, absolutely.
How he stayed up in general was unbelievable.
Was phenomenal. But I think that's my stance on it. I think the pass in the LCQ in the 250s was made off the track, and I think it was a good call. The thing about Marvin and the Red Cross, I think that is another good call. There is no reason to have any type of dispute about it. It is black and white. I think the reason why we have dispute is because for some unknown reason, the Americans love to hate him. He cannot do right no matter what.
That's true.
Poor guy. I like Marvin a lot.
The only one that would go on the podium and admit that he screwed up without blaming it on someone else. I would say that half, and I'm saying that generously, half of those riders would have went up there and been like, well, the flagger wasn't really out there. I jumped before the flag, so I never jumped after the flag, or whatever it may be. They would have had a reason of why, or they would have said, I don't recall, I never saw a flag on the podium, or avoided the question completely. And Marvin completely
he basically said I screwed up.
Correct. And he's the only one who doesn't do the whole Reader's Digest of let me thank, the man above and every sponsor. He just tells you how it is.
That's true.
And everyone loves to hate him.
Yep,
they could have told him that he had the Brock Tickle suspension and people would still be pissed that he's in America.
Yeah, I know. Poor dude. And he's really a nice guy too. Like he always goes out of his way to talk to me, and he's super nice. He's always smiling.
Well, let's go back to this Jorgensen pass for a second. Because I want to know what the other option. Wait, do you actually ride?
Or does no one here care about what I think?
You ignore me all the time. I was just trying my best to do the same to you.
I was proud of your answer on that, by the way, Jason, with the whole LCQ pass, because I agree with you 100%. That was a pass. That pass was made. Howell, who made the pass, had the advantage coming up the triple. If Jorgensen had got back on the track right there, obviously he would have been behind Howell. So technically, when people say he didn't make a pass or didn't gain an advantage off the track, yes, he did, because he went back around Howell. So I totally agree with that call.
On the same side of that argument, tempted to agree also. And the reason being is, if they didn't dock him that position, how would they approach a rider cutting an entire rhythm section out of the track and not being at a disadvantage on the other side of it? It's like you miss an entire rhythm section.
Yeah.
You can't.
So
On
me
that
as a
though,
rider,
Go ahead,
go
AJ.
ahead. Well, real quick, me as a rider, if Howell had hit me off the track like that, I would have gone at the same speed what's his face did around the triple. I would have looked to the left to make sure no one was coming. I would have entered at the same exact point he did. The only thing I would have done differently, and I know this is easy for me to say and it makes me look like I would do the right thing, but this is what I would do because in my mind it's fair. I would have let Howell go back by me and I would have hopped in right behind him. And what I would have done is I would have scrubbed the crap out of that triple, hit the sand really fast, and I would have passed him right back in the sand after the triple. Or hit him. Although that was it was an aggressive pass, but it wasn't dirty. But still, if it was enough to knock me off the track, I still probably would have hit him pretty hard after the finish.
Yeah,
Because
I think
that wasn't last lap, right? There's a full lap left after that. Yeah, there was.
Yeah. So I think, like AJ said, I agree that I think he exited, whether he wanted to or not, at the correct spot, and he re-entered at the correct spot. I mean, for him to slow up and come back in between the jumps of the triple would have been just ungodly safe.
Dangerous.
And you would have looked at very similar to the whole James Stewart Travis Preston incident when him and Reed got together. So yeah, I think that's where he did it was right.
Yep.
Well, now that we've got the big items out of the way, I want to talk about what was probably the second biggest point of conversation of the weekend, and that was the damn whoops. And the track in general, but whoops specifically. And damn it, we saw a few casualties, and I'm actually frankly surprised you didn't see more, to be honest with you. But Colt Nichols, that wasn't actually in the whoops, so I apologize. But he was a casualty. Chad Reed's out now. 8 broken ribs, punctured lung, broken shoulder blade. He's not doing too good. Any update on Brayton? Did anybody confirm if his?
I read
the torn ACL?
I read torn MCL and sprained ACL, and he'll be out for a few weeks.
And
you see, Chad Reed wants to come back for Vegas.
I think he just wants to be there. I think he just wants to be there to do autograph stuff. I don't think he's actually trying to ride. I don't think. I mean,
who knows with Reed?
Reed
does some crazy stuff.
His post literally made me like, what? He said he wanted to ride Vegas. That's how I took it. He said he knew it was crazy and he knew it was probably not going to happen, but he wanted to set his goal high to make him a better human or something. You look at the post on Instagram. His goal is to ride Vegas.
Man.
And I think,
but I mean,
off of
go ahead.
The injury side, I think we probably should take a second to send some prayers to I believe it's Gage Shear, who had a really bad get off in the LCQ. I actually didn't see it, so I don't know if it was televised or not. But
they showed it they showed a replay of him. The camera kind of caught him in the corner. Okay. He crashed on his own, and then he just got straight up frame cased, like somebody frame cased his body.
From everything I'm reading and seeing, it's not sounding super positive right now. So, which anytime there's no information being released is always probably the worst case scenarios.
But he was conscious, wasn't he?
But he's got something bad internal going on.
And he actually severed an artery. From what I'm being told through social media. Again, I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I did read on
those are. I mean, you get flashbacks. I got flashbacks of the Weston Pike crash when I saw that because he took an impact a little different part of the body, not the face, but it was very similar. Took the freaking
frame
to the body. Yeah, that's
on a high speed part of the track too. Yeah, that was that was scary.
You know what they didn't really show the main event 250 first lap, the crash, and was RJ Hampshire part of it? The crash like over that first on off, and there was like the on part, the table. I saw people go down. They never replayed it. They never
even saw
highlighted it, but it looked pretty. Yeah, if you go back and look, it was like right. I think it was the very first lap right after the start. I think that's what RJ Hampshire got tangled up in. But you saw bikes and bodies go flying, and they never panned back to it. So I was wondering what ended up shaking out there.
Oh, well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's talk track, because this track
Please.
was the layout. I thought, and I think a lot of riders would agree with me, was pretty awesome. It made for good racing. There was a lot of 180s. There was good passing opportunities, long rhythm lanes that created alternate options. There was some quads going on.
Kind of what you've been waiting for.
Yeah, there was some quads going on that I think you were crazy. I mean, I personally didn't want to do them, but at the same time, they weren't make or break, in my opinion. The one big thing was the dirt, which I don't know how, because Seattle, I've raced it twice in the past. One was a complete mutter, and then the year before that, 2017, it was one of the most rutted up tracks I've ever ridden. So I don't know how the heck the dirt got to be how it was, because this
Lime.
Lime.
That's exactly where I was going.
This was the hardest packed track I've ridden all year. So I don't know how that's possible. But
80% lime, 20% soil.
They actually switched to using battery acid now to dry out the tracks.
Yeah.
Well, it worked. And the whoops were awesome. I mean, I think we need more whoops like that. And some people will agree, some will disagree.
Let's go into the whoops. Let's stay right at the whoops, because that was something that everybody talked about. And some people were on the fence that they should dumb down the whoops and make it easier and like maybe more entertaining for opportunities to pass in the whoops. Other people felt like, hey, look, you're on a professional Supercross track. Why would you dumb down anything? They should be the gnarliest, the biggest, the whoops that take the most expertise to ride through. That's where I'm at.
That's easy for a fan to say also, though. And like when I put up my post on Instagram and asked for riders' opinions and got mostly fans' opinions, that's one thing that gets a little frustrating for me, is because they don't say the riders make it look easy, which that's what it is. These tracks are not easy, none of them. And when a rider is on the podium saying, "Oh, the track was a little easy this weekend," that's Cooper Webb saying the track was a little easy this weekend. That's not a normal human being saying that. I mean, if anyone rode these tracks,
we all take for granted. We all take that for
everyone
granted.
takes for granted that these tracks are insane every weekend. And a normal average Joe, even an average A rider from a local race, if you toss them on that track, they would look like a complete beginner rider. And they would be like, holy crap, this is no joke. So let me just start by saying that. But then when you throw in a set of whoops like this, I think there's a time and place for things that should be beefy and like sketchy, for lack of a better word. But the Supercross, the whoops, I think the whoops should be big, and they should be demanding, and they should separate the riders. And for me, watching the broadcast back, it was a blast to watch a guy like Dean Wilson pass two people in the set of whoops. Tyler Bowers come flying by a couple of people in the whoops. Zach Osborne started in second, faded back to whatever place he got because he was just slow in the whoops. I think that's what Supercross should be all about. It created passing opportunities for me, even though I'm pro whoops, pro big whoops. I was not great in them by any means. But every lap I looked at it as an opportunity to gain or lose, whatever, however you hit them, time. You could be 2 seconds behind somebody and get a good run through the whoops, and next thing you know, you're right up on them. So I think that was cool to watch. And not to mention, as a fan, trying to put myself from a fan perspective, sometimes it's cool to see the top guys in the world not be able to do a section that well. When you watch a guy like Tomac and Webb go through the whoops and they just look like, B riders trying to get through there, I think that's cool.
I thought the most entertaining part of the whoops, honestly, for me was watching Adam Cianciarillo battle with Dylan Ferrandis, and Dylan Ferrandis jumping the whoops so well, and Adam blitzing him, and then trying to emulate the jumping, and he just couldn't get it.
Another thing that's underrated is jumping whoops, like the difficulty of jumping whoops, because it's not just timing a 15, well, whoops are 10 feet apart. So you figure you're jumping 3 of them, you're jumping 20 feet?
2 gaps, yeah, 20 feet.
That's obviously not the hard part. The hard part is you're landing in these transitions that are not smooth. You're landing in this deep V, and then you're having to roll, and I've explained this before, you have all the dirt that's been pushed down from the guys skimming it, so you have this bump to deal with, and then you have to kind of try to deal with that bump and then take off, and then time the next one. And as soon as you mess one up, you've messed up the whole section. So for me, I skimmed the whole night, the whole day in practice and the whole night, because I simply, and I pride myself on having good timing. I couldn't time it. So I was just like, screw it. I'm just going to keep skimming. But
that's got to be a suspension setup nightmare. Is it are you going to jump the whoops or are you going to skim them? I mean, I'm sure that comes into play.
They're probably like, just stick to one, damn it. Because you have the guys that were doing something different every lap and couldn't figure out what they wanted to do. Or you would jump the 3 in, mess up the timing, and then just kind of skim your way out. I loved it.
On a suspension side, I think it's easier to dial in skimming because it's a consistent feedback, and if the guy is confident doing it, he's going to give you really good feedback. So you can make adjustments quick and easy. Whereas the jumping through, like what AJ just said, he doesn't feel comfortable doing it. So no matter what setting we have for him, it's not going to make a difference because mentally he just isn't accepting of that form. So like with Marv is known to jump through whoops more so than skim. The guys doing suspension over there at WP are probably much easier to dial him in for jumping than it is for skimming because his feedback's probably better and his confidence is there.
What would you guess it takes for bike setup to make it better for jumping? Would you want like a dead rear end, something that's maybe a little slower rebound so it's not kicking you in the butt the whole time, or what?
The rebound side of it may not change too much. You could probably slow it down a little bit, just because you're actually going to compress it more, and it's going to have that hard G. Whereas on Supercross swoops, if you stay on top, it's not necessarily a hard G if you're doing it right. You really don't get your hard Gs until you dip in. Whereas we'll probably run a little bit more compression side of it because you're actually going to be going through the stroke more so on jumping through the whoops. But with the whoop side of it, as far as a pure spectator, I do have one question about the whoops themselves, AJ, as a rider. When watching it on the television broadcast, it looked like the last whoop was a solid foot above the rest of the whoops. It looked sketchy because of that last whoop.
Yeah, this brings me to a good point.
TV angle. I don't know if it was a TV angle or if it was something that I saw on the track on the breakdown.
And they didn't talk about it on TV at all. They didn't explain what the entire whoop section was on an incline of a pad. So it just gradually went up and up and up, and the last 3 or 4 whoops got bigger and bigger, and it was like the end of the whoops was basically a dragon's back without something to land on. And they didn't talk about it, and on TV, like, you couldn't really tell. You could kind of tell that the last couple whoops were really catching people, but you couldn't tell the incline of the pad. So not only did you have 15 of them, not only did they start pretty much in the turn, but they gradually went up and up and up. So you were just losing your momentum as you got to the end, which I think may not have been a bad idea, to be honest with you, though, because if anything, it was just slowing people down so that you couldn't get Malcolm Stewart type speed through them and just come out the end of them going 50 miles an hour. But
I think as a spectator, watching the whoops, I thought they were phenomenal this week. I guarantee Josh Grant isn't feeling the same way as I am right now. And
Grant's good through whoops. I don't know why he was trying to jump him in the LCQ.
As any person that has a heart for this knows how frustrated he was, and I just felt so bad for him. And the entire track, he was just thinking about those whoops. Like, the entire track, his mind is like, God damn it, I gotta hit those whoops again. And and anyone who knows that when you ride and think about one section like that, you are going to grenade in that section every single time.
But
I think
let's talk about Josh Grant for a second.
Although low key, I was kind of hoping after he went down and AJ went around him, I was low key hoping. Who was it?
I
Alex
know
Ray
he
in
was
front of
getting
you?
squirrely too.
Yeah, I mean, not that I want to see anybody else go down, but if it's AJ getting in the main, I mean, maybe just a little get off.
But isn't this Josh Grant incident just basically? I mean, it just goes to show you though how stacked and how competitive this class is this year. Yeah, he was riding well elsewhere on the track, and he was fast enough to make the main, but not comfortably. You know, he made those mistakes and he crashed, or he stalled it and then he crashed because he was trying to ride really aggressive, because he was basically, he was on the borderline of possibly not making the main event. And that's Josh Grant on a factory Yamaha.
Yeah,
you take
and to
who knows how tight he was too, because it's been a while. But I think the whoops themselves were built phenomenally because they were very challenging. They separated all the riders. Like, everyone had a different approach, and it gave different speeds. And like you mentioned before, Wilson was skimming. Wilson was probably the best through the whoops all night.
Him and Bowers.
Absolutely. And
two of the tallest guys out there.
Then you had guys that struggled through them. And I thought that made a really good whoop section. And as a track designer, I think they did a great job, because they were a slower paced section, which means that the challenging portion, if it doesn't go well, is less likely to result in injury. So it still makes us have a good season, but I don't want to see someone walk away with the championship as a spectator. I love how close it is. And when you build sections like that are challenging and separate people, I think it makes really good racing. And every time we came to those whoops, you had no idea who was going to pass who was going to bobble, what was going to happen. And it keeps you on the edge of your seat the entire time.
To go along with that, Jason, I also like some of the rhythms. I mean, I know they're trying to discourage quadding. We've talked about that several times on the show. But this week we had 2 quad sections that not a lot of people were doing that. And it was cool that sometimes it looked faster. Sometimes it didn't look faster. Some people were doing them consistently every lap, like Ferrandis. And sometimes other people you'd opt to triple and single out or whatever. I think that was another cool part of this track, where we're seeing some separation with the guys who can do those more ballsy, for lack of a better term, and technical type rhythms. I think that helps separate everybody this weekend just from a pure technical standpoint.
And this track was more peaked than any track we've had this season, which you can't really tell from TV. But if you go back and look at the broadcast, just watch the rhythm that comes across the start, closest to the start line, where it seemed like the fast line was to the right, and you would go double off the little skipper jump and then triple, single into the turn. When you watch them land that first triple, you even saw Muskin make a bunch of mistakes there. That's where Colt Nichols crashed as well. That transition was crazy, crazy steep, so it was hard to get in that pocket. But with that being said, and these quads being thrown in there and people sending these 100-foot quads in the center of a rhythm section, why can't the announcers talk about it? Make it, I mean, I will say that they did mention that Ferrandis was jumping it and that Cincerillo should be jumping it to try to keep up, but to talk about how crazy it is, the fact that they're jumping this insane quad, and not to mention, nobody with the exception of Dean Wilson, to my knowledge, was jumping it up until the main event. So not only are these guys jumping this ridiculous jump, but most of them didn't bust it out until the middle of a main event and then just went for it. I mean, that's insane.
They do make it pretty underwhelming when you're watching on TV. They do. Like the average
person's like, oh, yeah, quad, cool. But if the announcers were just, made it, I don't think hyped it up a bit.
We can't talk quads though, unless we at least mention Toronto 2014 with James Stewart, where
oh my god, quadding
he
everywhere.
Comes from, I think, 15th place.
That's my favorite race.
Is doing 3 sections on the track, 3 sections, totally different than anyone else out there, and just going massive, and absolutely.
It's like the beginning of the end of the quad.
Comes through the pack and dominates the race. I know Feld has made a stance that they don't really like the quads and they're trying to take them out. But on a spectator side, I get they're dangerous. But I don't wish injury on anyone, and I've been through a ton of it, but that level of fear, what we as mortals of dirt bikes, speaking on my behalf, when we see guys huck these massive quads, it is impressive to us because we know what it takes to do it, and we know that we don't have it. And I can only, like I said, I can only speak for myself on that, but that is, I could tell you a million races, and I have a ton of useless bench racing knowledge to this sport, and I can tell you more about tracks, the year, the date, and what person was hitting a quad than I probably could tell you who finished first, second, and third.
Gosh, though, those of you that are listening, when you get done with this podcast, go on YouTube and type in 2014 Toronto 450 main event, because
full race, the full main event.
That is one of my favorite main events I've ever seen, and
Agreed.
I think I got sixth or seventh there that night in the 250 class, because that long rhythm section that Barsha was leading and kept messing up over and over, and that big rhythm that James was doing that no one else was doing, I actually hit that on a 250F. So not to toot my own horn, but me and James were the only two that did that all day. And there was another, there was St. Louis that year, that same thing. James and I were the only two that jumped a rhythm.
Nice.
I was a beast
actually like
in
when
2014, man. I used to be fast.
Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Yeah. I actually like it more when the guys quad when there is this kind of feeling that they're trying to discourage it, because they almost just slip it under the radar. It's like Feld is doing what they can and the track builders doing what they can to discourage it, and they still get it, and they don't see it coming. That to me is like sets it even farther,
because Dirtworks is just like son of a gun every time, because they're building stuff
damn it,
that they think shouldn't be jumped, and then every time somebody busts it out.
Well, the quad that Ferrandis was hitting every time, that didn't look like it could be quadded.
The on off,
like it just genuinely
which
didn't.
The one before the whoops.
Yeah, no. Was it the one before the whoops? No. The one that it was coming into the right-handed 180 into the other rhythm, I thought. I'm not looking at the
there was the rhythm coming across the start.
It was going left to right on the TV into a right-handed 180.
Oh, so that would be before the whoops. Yeah, so that section when we walked the track, because you would hit the finish line, hit the sand rollers, go left, and you'd have a long straightaway before that double in. On track walk, everyone thought we were going to jump all the way on top of that tabletop, which was like, I counted it out, it was like it was only 90 feet, but it seemed like way longer than that. But it was a ginormous step onto the table, and we thought we were going to have to go 3 off of the table and double into the turn. No one ended up jumping that, thankfully, and it turned into just a double, table over single, triple single, and that's where Ferrandis and at the end, a bunch of the 450 guys started doing it. They were going double, quad, triple right into the turn. But they were quadding off of a lip.
That is not the section I'm talking about, by the way.
So you're talking about...
Yeah, it is another section.
You got to learn your track layouts, man. So it's either that section, or it's you turn basically the flat right. You would do a little step up out of the turn, and there was an on-off right before where Howell hit Jorgensen off the track. And they're quadding that whole on-off right before the left-hand berm.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, you're right. I'm wrong.
Which that was insane.
What do I know? This is the show without facts. What do you expect?
Can we also? I don't know if maybe Austin Faulkner or Dean Wilson or Blake Baggett are happening to be listening. Can they stop doing the quads in press day or in practice? Can all the riders just stop so that way they don't have time to change it, and we can actually see it be done during the night show? Because the one at Daytona was awesome to watch from different angles, but yet by end of press day that thing was gone.
Yeah, but then that section turned into another giant quad that was in the center of it. So
it did, but it made it way more sketchier than
it was. It turned out to be one. Yeah, you're right.
And I'm sure Plessinger would love to have the other one back.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. They
So,
changed it to try to make it more safe, and it just became more dangerous because everyone ended up. They should just build the tracks how they're going to build them. Stop worrying about what the heck we're going to do on them, unless the riders are sitting there. That's the thing is I haven't heard any of the riders be like, "Ooh, this quad's too big. I think you should get rid of it." That's not where our complaints are coming from. The riders' complaints are coming from when a transition gets built a little crappy and it's a little off. Um, maybe if there's like a 270-degree sand turn that sucks and you just have to follow somebody around.
can we talk sand?
Yeah, sand sucks.
Can we talk it
Although,
though?
yeah, we can talk it. The sand section this weekend was totally fine because it was a straightaway, and I'm okay with that.
But as a fan perspective, I know all the riders hate sand, and as a mechanic perspective, when we have sand and I'm employed by you, it sucks. But as a fan sitting here watching it, pretty much most of the sand sections are absolutely fun to watch.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
I know they become one-lined, but the cool thing is that forces people. I'm trying to think. I don't know what round it was, but it was when they did the 270-degree. Chad Reed parked Eli Tomac in the sand. You also had Marvin Muscan, who was faster than Webb that weekend, if I recall, and was trying his best to find a line through the sand to get it. And I was watching him cross rut every single lap, trying to find an outside line through it. I think the sand sections make great racing. I prefer them when they do it like the Texas 12 pack down at like Freestone, where it's a wall and then rollers, where they do it a lot of times with that in the actual Monster Energy Cup. But I like watching the guys, huck it at different levels to see how many rollers they're going to jump into. The guys like Blake Baggett, these guys that love launching these massive wall jumps into rollers. I think that's great for spectating, and it creates different passes. And yeah, I get like some of the older guys and some of the other guys are probably like, damn it, that means I got to do it now. They watch one of these guys, these young guys who go out there and huck this shit, and you probably got Reed who's just like, damn it, I didn't want to do that today.
Yeah, what's funny you say that, because at Daytona, Forkner jumped that quad in the middle of the rhythm, last lap of free practice, and he was the first person to jump it. I was standing right next to Baggett, and Reed pokes over our shoulders and goes, "Damn, kid, I'm going to have to jump this thing now." It is true. Once one person jumps it, everyone has to do it. But I understand your point of view as far as, I get it. They're cool to watch, but none of the riders like it. But at the same time, like, yeah, we have to think about the fans. So if our compromise to that is we have to deal with the sand section, I guess I'm okay with that.
I mean, it's going to give us better TV time.
As long as we have some big whoops. Big whoops.
I think big whoops are great. I think they separate a lot of people. I think, and switching it up. I mean, having a track that has two different types of whoops, where maybe one is massive and spread apart to the point where people are kind of jumping through it a little bit more, to another section where they're skimming it. Now you're creating like an accordion on the track. You're going to have one guy that's excels in one area and then isn't as good in the other area. And then that's going to be, where they gets close again and then you're like, oh, they're coming to that section where he may make a pass, and then they're pushing for it. I think that is beneficial to the fan side, but I'm also very well, connected on the rider side of it because of the suspension side. So I deal with a lot of the feedback from the riders. So I kind of see it from both angles, which is good. And like I said, I also have that. I sleep 2 hours a day, and then I watch old motocross movies while I do suspension for the rest of the day. And then I watch more videos. I've probably seen every single race ever and can probably dial it down to people, but that's just, I'm the biggest fan of this sport. It's pure passion for me. I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm the same way though. And somebody was asking me about that after I didn't make the main and we went up and we were watching the main events this weekend. I forget who it was, but somebody asked if I enjoy watching it. I said, do I enjoy watching? I said, of course I enjoy watching. I'm the biggest fan ever of the sport. And it's true. I love it. I'm a super fan. I'm up there in the stadium watching the 450 main, which, yeah, of course I'm pissed that I'm watching it. But at the same time, like, I'm not going to lie, love watching the races. And when I retire, I'm going to continue to watch the races.
Well, that's heartwarming, but let's get on to business. And it's a perfect segue because I'm going to ask you specifically, putting you on the spot. How did you feel this weekend? I know you're frustrated. How'd you like the track? I mean, talk specifically about your experience on Saturday.
I loved the track layout. I just wasn't gelling with the dirt. And I think that's kind of been a common theme in my career is I struggle with the West Coast hard pack style dirt. And it took me a while. First practice, I was really struggling. First time qualifier, I was a little better. Second time qualifier, I got a little bit better. I think I qualified 24th to 25th. My heat race was a disaster. I stalled the bike twice. I kept hitting neutral, which was a really weird issue for me to have had. It's not something I'd struggled with prior. And then my LCQ, I got a good start, snuck around the inside, was right behind Alex Ray and what's his face there, Politelli, who were third and fourth, and felt decent. I didn't feel fast. I felt like I had enough to hang on to the back of them, which I did for most of the race. And then with 2 laps to go, I made a couple mistakes and I let Entic snuck by me. But I was proud of myself because for how crappy I felt right from the first time I touched the track, I think I salvaged a decent night out of it. And I didn't leave the race too frustrated, where 2 weeks ago in Indianapolis, I left the race ridiculously frustrated because there was no question I had the speed, and I basically just blew it because I got a bad start. This weekend, I was proud that I kind of salvaged something out of nothing.
Did you stall at the start of the heat race?
Yeah, I stalled halfway down the start straight away. So you could see me it was weird. Like I just hit the brakes too early, and then all of a sudden you see me just sitting there, but I didn't put my foot down.
Yeah, what happened?
I don't know. I don't. The bike just stalled, and I thought it. I had more than enough momentum to bump start it. So normally you would just dump the clutch back out and it would start back up, but it didn't. So I had to find neutral, and it was weird. And then I put in a really fast first lap, actually past 5 or 6 guys, and then hit neutral like 3 times on that lap, went backwards again. And then I was afraid there was something transmission going on, but it must have just been my boot hitting it. I don't know. I was all out of sorts in that heat race.
Weird. I wonder if it stalled, if that had anything to do with some corrosive liquid getting into the ECU.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Hashtag.
Finally
it finally made its way in.
Electronics. Yeah,
it's seeped in after a few weeks. I have a couple more. I actually have one more thing written here on my notes before we talk like specific main event racing here. Colt Nichols crash is what I had written down. And I think a lot of people were confused about what happened with that. And I wanted to kind of give my perspective, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead. I was not confused. So please tell our listeners.
And I think a lot of people would have thought that it was his fault or the way he landed. And I wanted to kind of explain the misconception here. So when you case a jump, he knew he was going to case it. You could tell as soon as he took off, he didn't get the lift he wanted. So he straightened out his body, like he was trying to just stretch for a little bit more. So he knew he was going to case it. But then what he did is he got the bike perfectly level, and he landed in the most neutral body position he could have possibly landed in, which is by the way, how you want to case a jump. The misconception is that when you case a jump, you want to loft the front end, get your front end up. And I don't know why people do this, but the only thing that's going to happen when you do that is it's going to launch harder. You over the bars, and you're just going to get torpedoed over the bars. And your crash is typically going to be a lot worse if you do go down. What was bizarre about Nichols' situation is when he landed, it just kind of whipped him around. But I guess, that's just a testament of how steep that landing actually was. And it just, for once, the TV did justice of how steep it was, because he landed exactly how he should have. He was barely short. I mean, his front end was well over it, and it just whipped him right around.
Yep.
Looked like it hurt.
Thank you for that breakdown. What did he end up hurting? I don't know. I just know he didn't come back.
I heard it was just some soreness.
Oh.
Like no actual injury.
Oh. Interesting.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's good, but kind of, I don't know if you could salvage anything with the DNF.
Yeah, poor guy. His season was going so good. I thought he had a chance there at the championship. Speaking of championship, thoughts on the 250 main event? I mean, fairly uneventful. Jamie Dakotas was killing the whoops. He was gelling on that track the whole night.
Yep. I mean, I'll say it again. I think the battle, the cat and mouse, I should say. I don't know if it ended up being a battle per se, but the cat and mouse between Ferrandis and Cianciarulo was cool to watch. I liked watching Adam having to work a little harder than he has to in the past, and he was still riding in control. Like he didn't seem like he was taking too many unnecessary chances. He didn't do the quad, the quad going into the whoops. I thought he would have done it sooner, and I think he was just playing it a little safer than we're used to seeing it, which was smart. I think that's showing his maturity on the bike and just kind of overall theme of him developing as a rider this season. But then he started to do it, and there was the cat and mouse that they played the whole main event, which was fun to watch. I think everybody was hoping that Cianciarulo would catch Ferrandis, and I think Ferrandis is another victim of the not American, so we're not going to be a fan of him. Another French guy. Maybe it's just a national thing, but I mean, he rode phenomenal. So I'm glad to see he got his first
yeah, he was due for one. Definitely due for one.
He's always so fast. Like whether it's the qualifying, he's always up at the top, if not number one. And he always rides super fast. He just hasn't really gotten the good starts that he's needed to capitalize on it. The other races this season, but I mean, the guy has some serious speed.
And those points aren't too far off, I don't think. Do we know? I know we don't have any statistics on this podcast.
They're not far at all. I wouldn't say they're less than 12.
Yeah, I was going to guess right around 12, which isn't that much. I mean, one little slip up.
The one thing I say, though, is I don't know if it's just all the French riders, but they never seem like they're pushing, and they just always seem like they're hitting their marks constantly. Like, I watched Adam for the race, and I thought he rode really well, especially because we know how sometimes he can, when he does get flustered, it can be a grenade for him. I think he rode extremely well, but there was a lot of mistakes. He cased a lot of jumps throughout the main, and you could tell that he was pushing and riding a little bit over his comfort level, but still within that like safety net of I'm not going to throw it away. But for Ferrandis, just always seemed to just be comfortable. Like he just was on a rail, and just there was very little mistakes. If any. Unfortunately, just his interviews sound like he's got peanut butter on the roof of his mouth, and I don't understand him.
That seems to be a theme with the French guys as far as smooth, calculated riding. I mean, look at Muskin's kind of that way. Like Christophe Pourcel was always amazing like that.
Villemin was another one. He just effortless.
Yeah, I mean, something in the water over there. That was cool to see. Two French guys, though, they were talking about it at the press conference. First time two French guys have won since I forget when they said it. I think it was Villemin and somebody else. Roncada. Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if that's facts. That's another French guy.
No, that is what they said.
Then I definitely knew it was facts.
Yeah. You need to come on here and be our fact guy, because we don't have facts. Bryce and I.
Yeah, our mantra is like, facts
Google
are for idiots.
What else? 250. Blos was wicked fast because whoops. Jacob Hayes was riding well because whoops.
And don't discount the fact that he's been riding on the 450 for a while too. So he's not.
He's having a really good year.
Yeah. I mean, so that says something, for seat time and just race experience, not taking any time off and getting on the 450. Oh, hey, Shane McElrath. What happened to Shane McElrath?
I don't know. I walked half the track with him on track walk, and he seemed fine.
He didn't want to point out.
If I think he's already pointed out.
No, this race would have been his point out race. But I mean, that doesn't matter unless he's going to set the rest of the races. Yeah, it was his point out race. But again.
You know what's
but
weird
again,
is that's what we talked about in track walk, and I can't say what he told me, but that would make sense.
But I can't see that being the case unless he's going to sit out the rest of the season.
I-
Because he's
if I
any
were him,
finish
I
he's going
would.
to have. I mean,
if
at
I
this
didn't
point
have a
now,
450 ride,
I mean, and
you had
especially if TLD is going to say, "Hey, come play again." I mean, what's the difference between Sandbag Nationals? I mean, we do it at all levels of our sport. So, unfortunately, it's sandbagging, but yeah.
wow.
But didn't he rode qualifying, right?
Yeah, but he could have just said he got hurt, or who knows? We could just be totally
from what I
we
read
could be
was
creating a conspiracy here.
There was a he had some back injury, some type of like back pain or something like that, and that's what kept him off the bike. Again, I see him racing this coming weekend, and I would imagine he's going to point out anyway. And truthfully, if he does decide to sit it out and race again, I think it's not a bad decision. I know everyone's going to be pissed off because it is sandbagging, but we're here for, and I say we as like I'm involved, but the riders are here to make money. This is their job. So if they can do anything to make more money, why wouldn't you? Like, so if he's going to get a better contract to run a 250 again next year and be a title contender, instead of going up to the 450s and being like a top 7 guy, and again, I think he'd be do very well on a 450. But for half the money, why would you? Why wouldn't you sit down there, go get a championship, then negotiate and make more money in the 450 class? I think it's smart business, and I think.
And what I can say about our conversation is, he told me he does not have a 450 ride as of yet. So that would make sense. And for example, like a guy like Davalos has been doing it his whole career, and he gets hated on for it, but he doesn't get hated on for it from anyone actually inside the industry that know, because anyone that is in the know understands why that's an obvious decision to make. You're taking a guaranteed ride, so why wouldn't you? When there's nothing 450 wise. I'm very lucky to be in the position I'm in where I don't need it. I have a good thing going with my privateer deal, and then I have the academy, because you have guys that are fighting for top 10s that may not have a ride.
And Mike Brown was another one. Mike Brown was in the 250 or the lights or the 125 class for a very long time, and it was for that reason. It wasn't as taboo back then, I don't think, because Grant Langston had some time on before he moved up many years. Now obviously there wasn't a point system, so you couldn't point out of it. But yeah, I think it's good for that. Plus, it keeps the racing better. It does.
Yeah, could you imagine how stacked the 450 class is going to be in a couple of years if everybody keeps moving up? Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll move right back down to the 250 class.
I think you should do that anyway.
I know. I keep watching these 250 races, and I could be doing pretty darn well on a 250 right now. But
you got to give me more than a week to build a 250 though. Like I can't. We can't do motor work and everything on a 250 in a week. So I need you to not give me AJ time spans and let me do some stuff.
I'll give you 14 days.
Exactly. That's what it is. He's like, all right, well, you want 10 days to have it? And then I need it delivered?
And if you give him 6 months with the bike, you need to also be in communication with him during that 6 months so he knows what to do. Yeah,
like, don't make me call you 12 times.
Not ghost him.
I remember the days when you loved me and you wanted something. What I'm going to start doing, I think I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start messing the suspension up so you actually have to contact me. So now that once we've gotten the suspension, like dialed in, so you're happy, you don't need me anymore, and I'm just another notch on the belt, notch on the AJ belt, and then
whole afterthought.
Yeah, big changes coming up to those pogo sticks.
Oh man, I'm a bad friend.
It's okay.
Back on track. Where are we at with the 450 championship?
Who knows?
So ironically, if Marvin didn't get docked at, he would have been what 5 or 7 points?
I think they said 7.
I think yes. Well, he got docked 7
now it's
points.
14.
But did he? I think Right. It was 14 going into the race, and I think that he would have made up 7 points because of where Cooper finished. Something like that. So now, we're getting in the final leg here, and might turn out to be a pretty dramatic finish.
I think Marvin wins it. So, if you want my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think 14-point swing. What first place is 26 points. What is second place? 23.
23.
You're asking the wrong fact suppliers.
It's a 3-point swing. It used to be 25 to 23, and it was a 2-point swing.
How many races are left? 5, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Yeah, so if Marvin won the rest of the rounds and Cooper Webb got second at the rest of the rounds, Marvin would win the championship.
Which we know is not going to happen.
But basically, it's whoever beats who at this point.
But Webb could get a sixth, and Muskin can take seconds and firsts and thirds, and it's going to be an interesting one. Have we counted Roczen out of the championship?
How far back is he? I was just going to say I haven't counted Tomac out yet. Although his performance wasn't.
You can't count anybody out, I feel like.
I know.
Can we talk about Roczen's comments about not having energy?
Yeah.
That's super weird, huh?
It's not off topic, right? All right.
No.
Do you think that's a pure excuse of why he can't come up with speed to match the Webb or Marvin
I don't
or
think
anyone
so.
else? Or do you think he's actually struggling with?
I don't think he. I think he must be struggling. The reason I say that is because he has plenty of other things he could blame his performance on. Like he could just say his injuries have prevented him from getting back to 100%. He could always throw back on his arms, in my opinion, if he really needed to. But that is everyone. But to come back from where he is at, just to say, and look, a buddy of mine just got freaking mono. It laid him up for 2 weeks. He was in the hospital for a couple of days, but it started out with he was just completely and utterly drained. And look, I don't want to be bleak here. I'm certainly not suggesting that Roczen has cancer, but that's one of those things where people experience just being completely devoid of energy, inexplicably, and then later on they find out that something's wrong. So
Lyme's disease, the Epstein-Barr.
Yeah, Lyme disease is a perfect. Yeah,
there's a bunch of different things.
Perfect example.
I don't know.
Could be.
And Roczen also hasn't been one in the past that make excuses, has he?
And I think he's losing. And again, I don't know what's going on in his head, and only he does, and it could be a lot with his trainer. That has got to be devastating on a mindset to have your trainer, become paralyzed and watch that around you mid-season. So that could be mentally just wearing on him, and that's what it is. And he doesn't want to say, and he may not want to say that out loud because he may not want Blake to feel guilty for something that he had no control of, in a sense, as a friend. And I could see that.
Yeah,
but
that could be true.
You also can't. I don't think he's at a spot where he can blame the bike right now because he's on a contract year. So if you start complaining about suspension settings or this and that, and not get results, I think your employer is gonna look elsewhere. So I think you run out of excuses.
On a contract year too.
Roczen and Tomac.
And
Sealy.
And I'm sure more that we haven't heard about too. Wow. There's gonna be it's gonna be interesting.
It's funny because we were my good friend Anthony and I were sitting here talking about what kind of moves were going to be made and who's going where, especially with all that being said, because I don't think Tomac or Roczen lived up to the expectations of why they were hired. Obviously they were hired because they were the top guy, the elite. And Tomac did have a motocross championship, and Roczen unfortunately had a ton of injuries, so I totally get it. But on a business standpoint, that doesn't matter. On a business standpoint, when you're spending millions on somebody, the excuses or the reasons just really don't matter. So do you think it's going to be something where they're like, we made a mistake, we need to go somewhere else? Where do you see those guys landing?
I don't see him going anywhere.
I want to throw
be crazy. What if they just switched? What if? Because Tomac was super fast on that Honda. on the Geico Honda.
I would imagine that Seeley's probably.
But we
pretty
also
worried.
have Adam Stancerillo, who's going to be moving up to soon, and I don't see Cowie letting him go.
Oh yeah, you know what? I was thinking about that because Savachi's.
But does Cincerillo beat Savachi?
Savachi's contract
Savachi's
is, I'm sure, for another year.
Savachi's having a hell of a year, and he's so under the radar. And he's another one where people he's the American that people love to hate. But he's been doing phenomenal, right? Finishing consistently like that top 7 to 4, and you just don't see him on TV because the TV never pans to him. You don't hear about him, and again, he's another one that, for social media wise, everyone is always on his case. He can't do right, but I think he's having a hell of a season. I think Cowie's going to stay with him, and I could see it being a Savachi AC show, and I could see
Savachi 1 year.
Well, there's a lot of shakeups. I wonder how this whole because Cowie just lost their main, was it mechanic or their main manager?
Mike Williamson is the race manager.
Yeah, and he just kind of unexpectedly left.
Yeah,
right.
And
like
he made
last week.
He made a post about it, and it seemed a little bitter, but it was very professionally said, so you really couldn't dissect a lot of it, but just you could tell by the way I perceived it to be, the tone just wasn't. It didn't go well. It was obviously abrupt. There's no one's ever going to leave in the middle of a season without it being a problem. Something to cause it.
Right. Yeah.
So, I just don't know where that would go.
So lots of shakeups maybe over at Cowie.
Could it be? Let's just play the rumor game because I think it's funny. Stewart has a big announcement coming up. We have no idea what it is, and someone who he's had a very long-lasting relationship with, just left Cowie abruptly.
Huh. I hadn't put any of that together until just now. I think everyone's expecting it to be like a formal retirement announcement with some big grand gesture, but maybe
not.
It
could be. It could just be like, hey, thanks for everything, I'm done. Or it could be, hey, I'm going to do the Carmichael comeback tour. Or, hey, I'm going to start a team myself.
I would be so excited.
I would love to see a comeback tour.
Every freaking fan who ever even turned the TV on one time and saw James Stewart on a dirt bike would love to see him come back. And the way he left and the circumstances that surrounded his departure, damn it, we want to see him back on a bike, or at least see him somewhere. We got the last glimpse of him was Danger Boy Deegan and him riding Deegan's track. Or Deegan riding Stewart's track, right? That was the last time he made any sort of appearance anywhere.
And on to the old guy category, do you think Reed is done because of the injury, or do you think he comes back for a whole another year?
I was going to bring that up too. Yeah, I don't know. Who can they?
I agree with you, AJ. And
well, we talked about this at the beginning of this podcast. Really, this is way back when, I think before the Monster Cup. Chad Reed take his age out of the equation, take his injuries out of the equation. He draws fans. He's a no-brainer from a business standpoint. People want to see Chad Reed. People love Chad Reed. So for Suzuki, it's a no-brainer to bring him back, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And not only that, though, but he's the only one, knock on wood, to pretty much avoid the JGR curse. And I hate to say that, but JGR has spent tons and tons of money on
and it's never
elite
paid
guys.
off.
On elite guys, whether it's Stewart, Millsaps, Barsha, a ton of them. And guys have had successful careers before and after, but when they were at the JGR, just couldn't get it together. And I'm not going to speculate on why, because I have no idea why. I'm just going to refer to it as a curse. I believe it's like the Bermuda Triangle or something. But Reed is the only one who came in there where they didn't give a crap where he finished because of exactly what you said. He's so popular that people just want to see him on the track and at opening ceremonies, that he's coming in here and he's getting his best results ever. But with also going off of that, I say he does another year simply because this year he looked like he was enjoying life. He looked like he was having fun. He had the motivation to work out and train like I haven't seen him do in a couple years. And I say this like I know him, but I've never talked to him ever. But he does seem like he's a much happier person from everything you have. And he uprooted his entire life from Florida to move to North Carolina, which leads me to believe that you're not going to do that for one season. Whether that meant riding for more than one season or riding and having a role at JGR somewhere behind the scenes or as a businessman or marketing standpoint.
Unless he really likes Charlotte.
Which is
but
possible.
I didn't think about that. Did he ever sell his place?
I think they're still
In
working
Florida?
on selling it.
Oh yeah, he sold the compound, yeah, or selling.
Yeah, I think
the
it's still
compound.
for sale. I think the compound's still for sale.
You should buy it, AJ.
Okay, let me get on that.
Yeah.
I'm drawing
looking
an
for investors.
amazing work of art right now. Oh yeah, Jason, you want to buy it first?
Is it a picture of you making the main next
Yeah,
weekend?
it is.
Visualize it, dude. Stick it on the fridge.
Well, it's been 104 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Do we want to keep talking? Because I should probably go work out.
We could.
Oh, come on. This guy.
Oh, a little training
This guy.
before
This
the
guy.
weekend. Oh, wow. Interesting. Well, you don't do. You said last week that you don't go to the gym, you don't lift weights, you don't do any lifting at all during the season.
I ride a bicycle.
You don't have a dirt bike. Oh, you're gonna ride a bicycle. Oh,
Or
remember
you're
those?
you're gonna frolic through the woods with Bear. Let's be honest.
Oh, I might do.
Exactly.
I frolicked this morning,
yeah.
but I might do a 2 a day.
We know.
How are you not embarrassed by those posts? I'm embarrassed for you. Like, look at this.
Look at this idiot.
I'm like, I show all my friends. I'm like, look at this metrosexual friend I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at this tight pants. Oh, this cute little doggy.
Proud of my dog. Bear, I'm proud of you. He's sitting here listening to this podcast. He's trying to learn.
He's probably eating your gloves or something. If I know Bear.
Yeah.
You're like a bulldozer parent for your dog.
You're a
You know
what does
helicopter
that mean?
parent.
what?
It means you bulldozer parenting is when you just clear the path, make everything easy. Bear gets all the participation.
Yeah,
medals.
he does.
Absolutely.
He did win Dog of the Day at Doggy Daycare a couple months ago, and we have it framed.
That only matters, AJ, if all the other dogs didn't also get it.
Yeah,
I
you
can't
know
be a part of
it's
this conversation
it's suspicious.
I gotta
don't-
sign off or something, man. I can't do this.
I don't know if he earned it.
Yeah, no.
We were proud of him.
All right, well,
Okay.
Hey, Jason, thanks a lot for coming on and chatting with us, buddy. We really appreciate it. I hope everybody got a little bit more knowledge about the suspension. And look, go to Jay's site, check him out, send him your stuff. When he's not helping AJ at the races, he's helping you. He's helping listeners like you and riders like you get their bikes dialed to perfection. Am I right,
Absolutely.
Jason?
And we will be at Budds Creek this weekend for amateur racing at the first round of Mama MX. We do a lot of trackside support, and that's going to increase more with my retirement coming up. And we will be at 2 more Supercross rounds to help AJ, but we have a vast knowledge of everything from amateur side to the professional side.
And
tell these wonderful listeners how
guys,
to find
I
you.
do nothing else. Really quick, Jason. If you guys don't care about how your suspension works, at the very least, send it in to you and do some coding, because I will say that
we can. If you don't want to ride like the pros because you can't, we can at least make you look like the pros.
like them. Yep.
Absolutely.
Look good, feel good, ride good.
And our coatings has been
Adage all the time.
top notch. We've spent a lot of money trying to dial that in, and it's been very, very good for us. And again, we're creating suspension sets that people think is unobtainium, and we're making it possible. But you can find us at www.sgb-racing.com, or you can find us on Instagram at sgb_racing, or you can always send us an email or anything like that.
Heck yeah. Well, thank
Sounds
you, Jason.
good. Go check them out, people.
Thank you, guys. I really
All right.
appreciate you having me.
All right, boys.
Toodaloo.
No problem. Thanks for joining.
See ya.
Adios.